we want something for our efforts beyond what you would think would be acceptable. And we said rare earth. They have very good rare earth. And the American presence will, I think, keep a lot of bad actors out of the country, or certainly out of the area where we're doing.
Well, let's unpack this further with Alexander Titov, a Russian affairs analyst and a lecturer at Queen's University, Belfast. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us. So when it comes to this deal, the way it stands right now, who do you think benefits more, US or Ukraine, or is it evenly matched right now?
Well, I think this is just a very general framework of a deal. The details will have to be filled in by a separate agreement, which is still being worked on. If the kind of history of this deal, which was supposed to be signed in February when Zelensky was visiting Washington, it has only been signed after lots of delays and scandals and whatnot in May, then we might still wait quite a lot to see who is actually benefits from this deal. But broadly speaking, I think the deal is kind of very much Trump's idea. He needs something to kind of wave around, saying like, we're not giving anything for Ukraine for free anymore. Beyond that, the fulfilling of the deal, I think, it still remains to be seen who is actually going to benefit, or if it ever will work, because next administration comes in and might throw it out anyway.
Does this bring a possible peace deal, though, between Russia and Ukraine even closer?
Well, I think this is completely irrelevant to the Russian and Ukraine peace deal, because this is between the United States and America, or rather between Trump and his idea of not giving anything for free to anyone. In terms of peace deal, I think the negotiations between Americans and Russians are continuing. There's probably some progress being made there. There's a parallel talks between Ukrainians and Americans, and then also Europeans being involved in various stages. I'm not sure there is actually such a big progress between Russians and Ukrainians themselves, because Americans are talking separately, and everything is fine when they talk to two sides separately. Once the key point is to bring those two sides together, and I just don't see any prospect of it anytime soon. I think we have to be realistic about that.
Okay, so we have to be realistic about that, but peace does need to come at some point. What do you think it is that could bring these two sides together to find something that does eventually end this war?
I think the real point would probably be a military collapse of one of the sides, and then the other, which means that one of the sides just have to sign the deal which is offered to it. This is not there yet. Neither Ukraine nor Russia are willing to accept that there is a need to long-term permanent compromise. Ukraine is on the back foot. Russia is preparing for, from what I hear and see in both Ukrainian sources and in Russian sources, is preparing for a major summer campaign. And I think, to be honest, that only at the end of this campaign we will see any kind of prospects, depending on how it goes, which you can never predict in war. They will see any prospect of a deal. The deal which is often being offered now for Ukraine essentially is, repeatedly they're saying that we not want to accept any kind of permanent status for the occupied territories, which is a part of core Russian demand. And without that, I don't see any prospects of actual permanent settlement. All this talk about temporarily ceasefire for 3 days or 30 days is really beside the point. If you're not if Ukraine is not going to accept now, while the war is ongoing, any kind of permanent solution, there'll be absolutely no incentive for it to accept it once there is a ceasefire. So I'm very skeptical there is anything will come out of these talks.
Can both these countries, though, continue this war as heavy as it has been? Because there have been casualties on both sides. The numbers haven't really been made public, but a lot of speculation. But of course, it's costing the country lots of money. And Ukraine at this stage is very reliant on help from its allies for any of that military support. Russia is looking towards China, and we know now that they've got North Korean troops there. But the military and human toll is exceptionally heavy to a point where one has to wonder, surely you have to come to some sort of resolution, even if it is a ceasefire that for Ukraine may not bring the justice that they're also looking for.
Well, the toll is high, the costs are great. This is a war of attrition, but neither side is actually at the point of collapse yet. Another point aside of admitting that they need to stop and have a secret permanent solution. Russia is kind of looking for a decisive military gains over the next 4 months up to the autumn. Ukraine is reasonably confident that it can hold its line and exhaust Russian advances. So, but even though they have suffered great losses, and Ukraine probably suffered more because its infrastructure and civilian objects been put under much more stress than the Russians ones, is nevertheless not in a stage where it has to accept that those territories are going. We have to kind of compromise essentially on Russia's terms, with basically what the terms is being offered now. So yes, the casualties are great, but they're not quite to the point where both sides feel like they have to stop, and there's no other way but to stopping it now.
Thank you very much for your analysis. Alexander Titov there in Belfast.
Thank you.